it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's like I've done some escape rooms through sort of a work context, partly from the fun aspect, but for the team building aspect. But we never thought about looking into the analytics behind the behaviors and all of that. It's such a good thing to do in lots of different ways. Like you've mentioned quite a few. But also just, yeah, it would highlight, you mentioned like if there are cliques within the team, it will become a lot more evident, won't it? Certain people will gang around each other and try and work out stuff and maybe exclude other members as well.
Yeah,
Which,
we have one metric that we show as a graph. It's called network analysis. It's measuring all the communication through this 45-minute game, the directionality of it. So that means, person A, person B, how much they communicated to each other, and then who communicated more. So you can kind of see if there's too much one person talking to the other. So if you don't show directionality, then it would just be a line between them. Um, but also, like, the more they communicated, then the lines get shorter, and that's how we can visualize those clicks, because you would have a group of people who really tightly communicating, and then you might have other individuals that sort of on the periphery and might have not communicated with everybody in the team, or maybe even just like really totally isolated, which is rare. I don't think I've seen in our games where there would be an individual who didn't talk to anybody. Um, but we have seen, for example, when we had one group from a university, and they decided to try several faculty members and several students. For whatever reason, that's the group that they decided to try this with. And I didn't know that. So we were going through their analytics, and in the network graph, we saw, I think, 3 or 4 individuals kind of tightly communicated, then like one line, and then they would have another grouping. And it was like significantly separated in this visual graph or visual data. And later on, I was talking to them about their data, and just kind of, and basically we look back who is who, and it was the students were kind of in one group and the faculty was in another. And it kind of gives you again this idea that potentially there was some psychological safety elements, and maybe some of the students didn't feel comfortable to just openly communicate with everybody on in this particular team.
yeah. So in some ways, it's like a highly resilient team. It doesn't necessarily mean that like everyone is maxed high on the outputs of they're emotionally intelligent, they look after themselves, their behavior, they communicate well. It can be a mix, because like I'm thinking for everybody listening, like we've all been on teams where certain times activities we've had to do have gone better than others. Certain times stronger characters have carried some of the other people to get the team to where it needed to get to, and all of that. So it's the balance, isn't it, between not trying necessarily to create a perfect team from the data. I mean, obviously, if you can create a perfect team, write a book, set up a course, get everybody doing the same thing. But it's you have to work with your team members, don't you, to some extent. But it's using the data to get insights as to, okay, this is really good, this area is not so good.
Mhm.
How can we tweak or intentionally sort of train or develop those aspects so that when the next big challenge comes, we're either quicker at getting through the challenge, or we're stronger, more resilient, that there isn't ill health, or there isn't emotional sort of trauma, or whatever whatever the case might be.
Mhm.
So it's really good that you provide the data, and I suppose it comes back to what we touched on at the start with regards to individual resilience. Like, am I going to respond to the stuff I'm looking at, the stuff that I'm aware of, or am I going to sort of sweep it by and just carry on as I am? And I'm thinking for people that lead teams, they get the data, they go through, they play the game, they have a good time. Then you give them all this interesting data that maybe they weren't aware of or didn't realize the detail that they would get. How can they then, what would be the process that they would then start to make certain changes? I know that's a big question, but do you work with them with regards to helping them change the habit side of things, or is it more of you just give particular information about certain areas?
Yeah, so we do provide some suggestions and kind of the areas based on the data, but we definitely quickly understood that there needs to be kind of a more of a to Z kind of approach, right? Not just, hey, we did this game and we've given some data. There needs to be ways, like you said, to start addressing some things. Some companies have internal programs and stuff, and so then we provide them data, and then they use that data as a way to maybe tweak their programs. But we also partnered with companies and companies in the team development space or leadership space, and so then they can use and actually a lot of times it's comes from them, so the teams would come from them. They would organize this virtual escape room activity, and we would provide the report, and they work with the teams in order to kind of create a more wholesome approach to change some of those behaviors. I think it really depends, right?
Yeah,
Depends on the company, on their budget, what makes sense. And I do believe that just like with individual resilience, there's lots of things that leaders can implement, and they can be that role models in their
yeah,
companies, in their teams, because when you have, we've seen this again and again, right, in certain corporations where the morale is low, where it you can kind of see it that it certain norms that been implemented, certain behaviors that been normalized, um, and all of that is creates that environment. And so many things do start from that leadership, from kind of that top bottom. Doesn't have to be, and we've had teams that are a bit more flat in their kind of roles and stuff, and it really depends on what kind of culture you're building,
yeah,
what makes sense, how big your organization is. No matter what, typically when the corporation grows, you kind of create certain levels, right? It's really difficult to stay flat when you grow. And so then when you start growing, for example, especially rapidly, a lot of companies who do succeed fast, right? And so they have this spurt of growth and opportunity. Um, that's when you can really implement a lot of cultural, I don't want to call them policies because it sounds so, but it could be policies even, but
yeah,
definitely at least behavioral norms that could um, create that soil we talked about for the plant, right? And it's not something you do, like for example, many companies put their values, and it's somewhere like visible, sometimes even this beautiful like wall art, right, with the values.
yeah,
If it's not practiced, if it doesn't show up in your daily meetings, in your how you treat your partners, how you treat each other, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how beautiful those values are or how nicely sounding they are, right?
yeah,
And so I think that that's where it comes to the leadership more, because they're ultimately responsible if they notice certain deviations. If psychological safety is low, if the engagement is low, then that's their clues, right? That's, there's something off.
yeah,
And that would be the area that either to use the tools that the company already has, and if they don't, then maybe outsourcing with companies that do have expertise and are kind of working with the corporations, especially large ones, because it does become more difficult to implement it across, I don't know, 1,000 employee company or more than a
yeah,
thousand.
yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's like when, like, if you're in a team where you know the environment's not as good or as healthy as it should, chances are everybody on the team knows it, not just the leader. If they're not reaching their targets or not accomplishing whatever it is that needs to be done, uh, everybody's aware of it to some extent. And I think the fact that, like, leaders lead, don't they? So if the leader then approaches you or looks to get data and stuff on, okay, we know we're not doing it right somewhere, but we're not
Mhm.
quite sure where, we need a bit of help, then they can get some insight that you guys provide and work on that. And then would the next step be, is there like a different game they could reevaluate that, say 6-12 months down the line? How would it work from a sort of
So that's something we're working on, creating a platform of different games. But for now, there's levels to the game that I mentioned. And so
okay.
typically very few teams complete all levels, so they could basically replay this game now that they know a little bit more on the background, so they can kind of go through a more difficult level on the game. So, but we do want to create a variety. That's something we believe could be helpful, because not everybody enjoys escape room, right? And so we've thinking about role playing as a game, or maybe kind of closer to like a building, right? Like I'm sure you've seen those games where you have to build a colony or something. So
Mm,
there's many cool elements of popular games that we can leverage in a way that becomes more of a simulations. And the reason why I use that word is because there's many hidden things in the game that allows us to create, to increase the data signal. So, and that's something we worked for some time in order to create, because otherwise, like there's some people would approach us, well, why can't we just use the algorithm to analyze Slack data? And because you don't have that context, you don't have what we designed on purpose to create an environment where the team would react in a certain way, or what I mentioned to you about kind of how we distributing the information and we're following where the information is heading. And those are two examples of some of the things that we do.
okay, well, that's really good. This has been really interesting conversation. I think I could probably chat to you for a good few hours to dive into it more. But for now, I think hopefully it's given everyone an insight into the chapter, insight into Wisnok and what you guys do. And I think hopefully people are listening and thinking, right, so whether I'm a leader of a big team, a large organization, whether I'm just leading myself at the moment, I think thinking about how resilient you are is such a key area to throw into the whole growth and leadership development journey that you're on, because your behavior will affect everyone that you interact with one way or another. You are, as we've said, as encouraging as it is, you are going to go through tough stuff just because you're alive, really. Nobody escapes it, but you can take certain steps to navigate it better, quicker, or if necessary, you get through it and then you learn better from having got through it. There's lots of different areas that you can go through stuff and then make it useful to you in your growth journey going forwards and with other people. And we need insight. We need external input at times. We need external support to get through the tough stuff as well, but also the learning aspects. You get data from raising your level of self-awareness, data from doing a game like Wisnok provides. Lots of different ways and tools that hopefully, if you haven't been thinking about resilience before our conversation, started listening to it, hopefully you're thinking about it more now. And there's one or two steps, I'm sure. Even if the first step at the moment is think through the last big challenge you had. How could you have done it better? Or what were the areas where you thought you did really well? Somewhere you thought, actually, I know I could have been better in that aspect, or I could have got more resource or support. I could have reached out to somebody, but for one reason or another, I wanted to get through it myself, or I didn't really feel comfortable reaching out, whatever. We've all got different scenarios and reasons why we do things and why we don't do things. But there's definitely something you can do to work on your resilience. And then from the team perspective, how can you be more resilient to encourage your team members, whether you're leading the team, whether you're just one of the members? I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but whether you're the key influencer or maybe not at this point, if you build a strong level of resilience, then you will definitely bring a positive influence to the team. As we were chatting before we started recording, that the weakest link within a team, that there's the least resilient person in the sense within a team can actually be the thing that determines the outcome and the level of success.
Absolutely.
We don't
Yeah,
want to be that person, do we?
yeah. Well, and because it's contagious too. When somebody is like behaving in such a way, for whatever reason, that's also human nature. I think that we tend to kind of, for whatever reason, even if we have, let's say, a little bit higher resilience, but when the environments are changing to be kind of a bit more hostile, unsafe, or chaotic, or whatever, right? We tend to also start kind of losing it a little bit, and so it could become, like you said, the weakest link. And so, I think the most important part here too is that those type of skills are not just for your corporation to be successful. This is your life skill, right?
Yeah.
This is your ability to deal with some of the most difficult things in our lives, like from loss to failures to relationship things that all of us go through. There's so many elements of life where we need resilience, and so I think that it's never going to be a wasted effort, right, to put some thought
So,
and practices into building your resilience.
yeah, you're going to face the challenges one way or another, aren't you? So you might as well be as armed and as equipped as possible, and
Definitely.
approach it from the best perspective. So yeah, lots of wisdom in that. Just as we wrap this up, so how can people sort of touch base with you? What would be the best way of getting hold of you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Anastasia Neddersen, pretty easy to find me. Surprisingly, it's a rare name. And also my email, anastasia@wiznook.com. Wiznook is spelled WHIZNOOK. We have our website too. You can always check us out and send an inquiry there as well if you're curious or would like to maybe do a demo or something like that.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I think that that's probably the easiest way to get a
sounds
hold of it.
good. Perfect. And of course, get hold of the book as well and dive into more of what Anastasia's written about on resilience there. Maybe get a few copies for your team and pass it around. Get everybody thinking and talking about resilience and how to develop it. For, like she says, the individual stuff and the corporate stuff that we all go through. So brilliant. Thank you, Anastasia, for your time. It's been brilliant what you've shared.
Thank you for having me. This was great discussion, and yeah,
I really enjoyed it as well. All good stuff. And it doesn't hurt to refresh and think about it on a regular basis. So for everybody that's listened to this, catch it again in a week's time or something like that. Just get it thinking, get it in your thinking and how you reflect and what you're going to do with the info that you get when you do reflect. Thank you for joining us. That's everything for now. Just as we leave it, we believe in you and we believe in your potential, particularly as you develop your resilience. So thanks for joining us.
so
Bye for now.
bye.